Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are on our 10th episode of Enter the Abyss.
Wow, that's quite the accomplishment.
Is it, though?
Well, it is for my back for carrying this.
Oh, snap. No, but I think it is a really good accomplishment because I look back to, November when we did our first one. And
We were such amateurs back then.
I know, we're pros now.
Yeah.
We got it all figured out.
Allegedly.
But guys, seriously, 10 episodes in, we want to thank every single one of you for listening. Special thank you for those that have listened from episode 1 all the way through. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, we definitely got a couple viewers in, was it Europe? England?
I think both. England is, I think we've got a consistent listener. If you're out there, if you're listening to this, thank you very much.
Send us an email. Give us a suggestion.
Seriously, we want to know who you are. I mean, we want to know who everyone is. We want to have more suggestions. We've done one listener episode so far. We're going to be doing another one in the next coming weeks because we've got some more topics to cover.
Right. It's entertheabysspod@gmail.com.
And if you don't want to email us, that's fine. We are on social media at Facebook, Enter the Abyss Pod, so follow us there. We are on Instagram, but I'm going to honestly, I suck at Instagram.
I don't use it. I just want to know who sent us the hate mail. That's really strange.
Do we have hate mail?
Yeah.
I didn't know we actually had hate mail. But there is something that we haven't quite talked about, and I kind of feel bad. For those of you who prefer YouTube, we are on YouTube as well. Cleet puts every episode on there with some awesome visuals. So if you prefer the visual world, YouTube is there as well.
Yeah, I try to tailor the pictures to the story, so it's not just some randos like clowns or something.
You never know with Cleet. He's kind of a sketchy guy.
Yeah, it's true.
Cleet and I have a lot of projects that we want to do later. And with that, we need to consistently grow and get better. And with that, we need your support. So please reach out to us. Let us know how you guys like us. Let us know what you suggest. We're always open, and we have a lot of things we want to do, and we need your help to do that. So
yeah, share this with your friends, enemies, estranged lovers.
And so you mentioned we're in England and Europe, but we're actually, as of this morning, in 14 different countries we've been listened to.
That's pretty cool.
Which I never thought would be.
Sometimes you gotta listen to the velour voice.
But Cleet, I have a question for you. As we are here in episode 10, tell me, what's been the favorite topic you've covered so far?
Skinwalker Ranch.
That was quick. You didn't have to think about it.
Oh, I love that. There's some interesting updates about that. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. There's this UFO guy on there, and he was adamant that he knew the new owners. What was that name of it? It was the Wolverine.
Adamantium.
Thing. Yeah, that corporation. He's saying he knew who they were, and that they were about to drop a bombshell soon. So we'll see what that is.
If they're opening Skinwalker Ranch, we're going. We're going immediately.
Fuck it, we'll do it there.
I mean, I've always wanted to go to Skinwalker Ranch. It makes me sad that they've closed it off. But there's also, speaking of Skinwalker Ranch, I guess there's a show on History Channel right now about Skinwalker Ranch, and it's pretty popular.
I'll have to check it out. I'll have to turn on the TV?
The boob tube.
The boob tube.
Yeah. Now that we're in quarantine, that's kind of all we can do. But you don't watch a lot of TV.
Yeah, I only watch YouTube.
I guess
I'm a connoisseur, damn it.
Special connoisseur of the YouTube. I think honestly, my favorite episode that we covered that I did, I really like the Elisa Lam thing because it still shocks me, especially that elevator video on there. But I don't think anything will top our first episode because I just remember the jitters I had when we hit record.
It was a little awkward, definitely. I didn't know what to say.
I like to think that we got better, but I'm sure everyone at home's like, no, you guys sound the exact same.
You have the worst personality in the world. May God have mercy on your soul.
You should stop podcasting while you're ahead.
What is the main dish tonight, Britton?
I'm talking about aliens, and not just aliens, but the first ever documented, publicized alien abduction.
Oh, the two old people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that.
What do you mean by old?
It was the first alien abduction. It was really what set the precedent of all the future abduction stories. I don't know their names.
Quit stealing my thunder.
No,
God damn it.
He hasn't told me prior. I know UFOlogy a lot, I guess.
Oh, you're a UFOologist. A ufologist, I think they call them.
Yeah, I get paid a lot for that.
You're a cheap ass then. Cleet, what are you talking about?
I'll be going over Bob Lazar. He is a guy who blew the whistle on the government in the 80s about them having alien crafts. Do you believe in UFOs? Or aliens? Do you believe in aliens? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, an alien being something that's not of this world, yeah. Because I think it's to think that there's nothing else in our whole solar system is impossible in my mind. So yeah, I would think there's other beings out there.
I mean, bring up your scale, right? So so we're in the Milky Way galaxy, which has about 1 trillion stars. Galaxies are, a cluster of that. So we have the Milky Way, we got Andromeda right next to us. There is over 1 billion galaxies with 1 trillion stars in each of them. I mean, there's gotta be life. I think the hard question is, have they visited us?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I mean, the existence of an alien, yes. Have they been here? Do they know we're here? That's the question. And I think there's a quote that comes to my mind, and if I'm wrong, people, I apologize, but I think it was Stephen Hawking that said it. That he said something like, "If you make a call, prepare for an answer," or something along those lines.
I know that Stephen Hawking said if there is alien life and we do contact them, it will basically destroy us.
Right.
Because every example in history of a civilization that's more advanced meeting a less advanced civilization, they get raped and pillaged.
Yeah.
The lesser ones.
But yeah, I think the ideas of aliens are there. And jumping back to the episode of Skinwalker Ranch where you talked about a quote-unquote fourth dimension that could always be around us, but we're just not, we don't see it.
Yeah.
It's there. So I think it's really interesting to think about that stuff. In fact, I've thought long and hard about it.
So Joe Rogan actually has a theory about what he thinks aliens are. I'm not going to say this is what he thinks, but this is something he's postulated on his podcast. But so there is a clear correlation as humans, every generation of humans, people get smaller, less strong, and their heads get bigger. And the idea is that he throws out is the aliens that people see now, the Greys, they're like 3 feet tall, big old heads. That could be people in the future going back in the past. And
that's interesting.
And the reason why we stopped seeing them when we got cameras is because, well, that's all well documented. We got our fucking social media where all these people fucking post all of their like daily lives on there. So they would have been more likely to go check out the 60s and the 70s to see how the lifestyle was and how people lived. But now, why would they go here now? It's all documented.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I don't know. And I talked about it last episode too. Stephen King's new book that came out. I finished it last night. I always read them pretty quick. And there's a couple stories in there where he kind of talks about the idea of there being another dimension. And it's I've just been thinking about it a lot because we are small. We are so small when you think of the vastness of everything there is. And it kind of puts things into perspective sometimes.
We're on a rock traveling 30,000 miles an hour in an infinite abyss.
That could end any second.
True. You remember the Reddit episode.
But anyway, thank you, Cleet, for the science lesson. That was awesome. Science with Cleet. Gotta have that every episode. But let's go ahead and talk about this. So, again, as you said, they're the couple that I'm going to be talking about, Barney and Betty Hill.
Yep, I knew it.
Yep. As you put it, are the old couple that claim to have been abducted by aliens.
I think this is probably the most compelling UFO story of all time. I'm just going to throw that out there right now.
Yeah. And so their story starts, and we're going to kind of talk about their story and around the time frame at that point. So this took place on the evening of September 19th in the year 1961. Betty and Barney Hill arrived at their home at around 5 a.m., not remembering how they had gotten there, and that they were missing 2 hours of their life, and they have no idea what happened in that 2-hour time frame. They would go on to explain what was documented as the first ever alien abduction. This incident later became called the Hill Abduction and the Zeta Reticuli Incident because the aliens that kidnapped them were from the Zeta Reticuli system.
Oh, that's so weird because that actually transitions with my story. What? I didn't know.
The Zeta Reticuli?
Yeah.
So before we jump into their specific story, a bit of a background, kind of that time frame, because aliens and UFOs during that time, I mean, they didn't really surface until around the 1940s, but they didn't start abducting people until movies and TV programs in the late 1950s. So, I mean, at that point in time, it wasn't a really super popular idea. So it's not like they had a lot of influence to think that this was a common occurrence, right?
It's interesting, though. I feel like this is probably the most legitimate alien abduction story. I think that it's been told so much in popular culture that a lot of other abductions could be explained by natural phenomenon. And what I'm going to say is like things like sleep paralysis. So I'm going to give you a story here, Britton. So when I was married once, I had the scariest sleep paralysis episode of my life.
Oh, jeez.
Dude, it was
I've
creepy
never
as fuck.
experienced sleep paralysis.
Oh, I have it all the time because I read Reddit a lot and I get paranoid and I have trouble sleeping.
Yeah, when you're doing research for this at 3 a.m.
So I was laying in my bed one night next to, my wife at the time. And it's important. I have to have her in the story for it. And I started to feel the sensation that I was floating above my body, I guess. Or maybe I was just floating in midair. Okay.
Like an out-of-body experience almost?
I almost take it back. Like it was still my body, but I was hovering above my bed, okay?
Gotcha.
And I started to go up in the air and I started to panic and I could feel my heartbeat just pounding as hard as possible. And during sleep paralysis episodes, your body is kind of paralyzed. That's a common occurrence.
Hence sleep paralysis.
And I focused so hard to move my hand that I was able, at least I thought, to reach out to my wife to grab her, to wake her up, to help me. And I guess I fell in a deeper dream state because in my perception, my wife woke up and started floating up with me. And I was grabbing her foot and she started screaming. And then I just snapped out of it and I was back on my bed. And I was sweating profusely. It was terrifying. I think I was about 21 years old at the time. So it was about 10 years ago.
You were in the middle of being beamed up to a spaceship.
I honestly think it was natural occurrences.
Yeah.
But it was probably the most surreal experience of my life, and I think that explains a lot of alien abduction stories. Not saying it doesn't happen, but I think that's a large majority of them.
My wife had a really scary sleep paralysis moment before, and I wasn't home, and she texted me, and she was super upset by it. I don't know all the details. I'll get it from her and tell her, and maybe we'll do an episode on sleep paralysis because that's an interesting topic.
I've read so much about it. That would be a good one. Anyways.
All right, well, back to the aliens. Thanks for the story, Cleet. Since the Hills claim was the first to be publicized, it formed somewhat of a template that would be used in later stories from other abductees. Sometimes the details change to a minor degree, but usually they report being taken by otherworldly beings, subjected to multiple various experiments, and then finally returned forever changed. The Hills first told their story to a psychiatrist, which we'll get into more, and then shared their story for a book and then a TV movie called The UFO Incident that premiered in the year 1975. Funny fact, in the 2 years after the TV movie premiered, the number of alien abduction reports increased by 2,500%. This was something never recorded in human history before the Hills. So it's that age-old, oh my God, I better call, and all the phones are going, oh, I had this too, I had that too, because they saw it on TV. But the Hills were really the first ones to document an actual abduction.
And that's why I believe them. I think most of the majority of these cases are just misdiagnosed sleep paralysis episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could be. As of today, roughly 2.5% of the U.S. population has reported some form of alien abduction. Studies that have been performed by non-ufologist psychologists have seen that there are two truths that this unique cohort shares. The first truth is that they aren't lying, at least not consciously.
Right. I mean, again, I don't want to freaking beat this drum, but if you have a sleep paralysis episode and you don't know what it is, you're going to believe it, right?
Right.
It's the George Costanza Seinfeld episode where they're trying to beat the lie detector test, and George says, if you believe your lie, you're going to pass.
Yeah, I mean, so they're not lying to themselves, so they wholeheartedly believe it. Even if the evidence stacks against them, they believe themselves that they were abducted by aliens. That's the first truth. The second truth is that they aren't crazy, at least not in the way that we think of crazy people. However, they do tend to differ drastically from the rest of the population on some key psychological traits.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to know.
So those are the two truths that are common in those who have been abducted by an alien. Now, every year there is a meeting in Rhode Island for alien abductees, or experiencers, as they like to be called. There are also numerous support groups online for abductees, and July 2nd is now known as World UFO Day. So, I mean, if you're out there and you need some help online because you've been abducted, there's a lot of online stuff. And July 2nd, there's a lot of people that gather for this UFO Day. That's a little bit of a background, so I want to jump into the story of the Hills specifically as we talk about their abduction. So let's go ahead and beam ourselves into this story.
Beam me up, Scotty.
On a clear and starry night at around 10 o'clock p.m., the Hills pulled into a roadside diner for coffee. According to The Interrupted Journey, which is the book that was published in 1966 about their experience, They were planning on arriving at home at around 3 in the morning. Once finished with their coffee, they hit the road. Shortly after leaving the diner, Betty saw a bright object in the sky through her rearview mirror. At first, she thought it was a falling star, but soon it shot straight upwards, started moving erratically and grew bigger and brighter. She asked, obviously, that Barney pull over the car, and he got out to investigate with his binoculars. He stated that what he saw was a spacecraft with a set of double windows that he could see clearly through, and saw at least half a dozen living beings, all wearing uniforms and staring directly at him. So, you pull over, and you see that. What do you do, Cleet?
Shit your pants.
Again, no hesitation with your answer. Just bowels let go.
That's how you get predators to not eat you.
Well, as long as you wear your brown pants. So obviously terrified, he hops back into the car and peels away super fast, taking a side road and trying to lose the spacecraft. It continues to follow them and at one point flew over them and hovered over the mountains in front of them. Eventually, the craft rapidly descended toward their vehicle, making Barney stop the car. It hovered roughly 80 to 100 feet above the car. Barney got out again with his binoculars, seeing the figures once more. He claims that one figure communicated a message down to him saying, "Stay where you are and keep looking."
So like telepathy?
Yeah, it was like it just beamed it right down to him. So he ran back to the car yelling, "They're going to capture us!" And he again got in the car and drove away at high speed. They recall hearing a series of loud beeps, and both of them felt a weird sensation of odd tingling, drowsiness, followed by a sort of haze. When they finally came to, they were 35 miles or so down the road, and they don't remember that 35 miles.
Wow.
Barney drove the rest of the way home feeling groggy. Now, again, they arrived at 5 a.m., and they started to see this thing right after they left the diner. So there's roughly 2.5 hours that are unaccounted for at this point. They got home, and they have no idea what happened in that time. But when they first got home, the first thing they noticed were Barney's scuffed shoes and his broken binocular strap. He also had a strange, horrifying feeling that something had happened to his body. So he immediately runs into the bathroom, takes off his clothes and checks everything, and specifically, I don't know why, but specifically his genitals.
He got touched.
A few days later, Betty started to have nightmares, and then Barney would tell his friends about a feeling that he described as one of a person who saw something he doesn't want to remember. Both of their watches also never worked again after that night.
I'd be curious how the watches worked. Like, was it wind up? Was it, battery operated?
Well, 1961, I would assume it's, I don't know.
They had batteries back then? I don't know.
Also, the dress that Betty was wearing that night had a pink dust on it that blew away when she went to investigate it. She kept the dress, and over the following years, several forensic analysis tests have been done on it. I didn't find any conclusive evidence on it or what they found, but I'm assuming they didn't find anything because at that point in time, the dust was gone.
I was really excited for that, and it just didn't go
Didn't
to
go
my
anywhere.
expectations.
The car that they were in also had shiny circles on it that had not been there before. The hills would put a compass close to the circle, which would cause the arms to rapidly spin out of control, so it's just going crazy. And then when they pulled it away from the circle, it would just stop. So it's like got some crazy magnetic field on it. As I mentioned earlier, Betty started to have some nightmares, and she went on to explain the nightmares, so I'm going to go ahead and describe what she had said. She claimed that the nightmares had gone on for 5 consecutive nights, and that she had never, ever had dreams with such detail and intensity. After the 5th night, however, the nightmares immediately stopped. During the month of November 1961, she began to write down the details of her dreams. In these dreams, the Hills car was stopped at a roadblock and men surrounded the car. Betty would then lose consciousness, but suddenly regained it, and they were walking through a forest at night with 2 small men. Barney was walking behind her, and when she attempted to communicate with him, he wouldn't respond as he was in a sleepwalking state and completely unresponsive. The short men were only about 5 feet tall and were wearing matching blue uniforms with caps that you might see in a military cadet. When they say small men, I'm thinking like 3 feet. They're saying 5 feet. I think that's pretty average for that time. They were almost human in nature, with black hair, dark eyes, prominent noses, and bluish lips with grayish skin. The men walked them up a ramp into a disc-shaped craft made completely of metal substance. Barney and Betty, once they entered the spacecraft, were separated, and the man that she called the leader told her that it would take too much time to examine them together. When Betty was placed in her room, Another man called the Examiner, as she called him, entered and had a calm manner about him. Although they spoke in English, she had a hard time understanding and pinpointing exactly what they were saying.
I'm just curious, were they talking or using telepathy? Like, that's my biggest question.
Yeah, I couldn't find... I mean, this is just something that she wrote down. I didn't...
Who knows?
The Examiner told Betty that the tests were to discover the differences between the humans and those in the craft. They put her in a chair and shined a bright light on her. The Examiner proceeded to cut a lock of her hair, then inspected her eyes, ears, mouth, teeth, throat, and hands. He then trimmed her fingernails to save a sample, and after examining her feet and legs, he scraped some of her skin onto what resembled cellophane. Just collecting the skin particles and fingernails. Us humans are disgusting. Then he tested her nervous system and thrust the needle into her navel, which made her feel intense pain. The leader immediately waved his hand in front of her face, instantly stopping all pain.
Ah, little magic man.
Magic aliens.
You shall not feel pain.
The Examiner left the room so Betty and the leader had a conversation. Betty found a book with strange symbols on it and asked where they came from. The leader said that she could take the book home and pulled down a map of the stars. The dream ends with the men escorting the Hills out of the ship after an argument broke out. The leader changed his mind on letting Betty have the book and that they didn't want her to remember the encounter at all. Betty told them that no matter what they did to her memory, she would remember at some point in her life. Because this isn't something you just forget. Once they were escorted back to the car, the leader advised that they stay put and watch the aircraft take off. Once seeing it fly away, they continued the drive back home. And that's where the dream ended. So she had that dream consecutively for 5 nights in a row. And she wrote it down, and that's what she told everybody that happened.
Can you imagine, like, telling your friends that? You're like, hey, I had this dream that this, and this happened. No one's ever had that experience before.
Well, I mean, remember, this is the dream she had, not the actual experience. So she would go on, and we'll talk about this, but she was very public about her experience. So I don't think she had any reservation about telling what happened. It took the Hills 2 full years before they ever went to see a psychiatrist. He placed them under hypnosis, and they both recounted what happened that night. They described short, gray aliens with big eyes that wrapped around their heads. They took the Hills onto their spacecraft where they proceeded to probe them with needles. The psychiatrist, of course, didn't believe a single thing what they were saying, but said that he could tell that they believed it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think they would be crazy if, like, they were my patients.
Barney recalled his interaction with utter terror, where Betty was more calm about the interaction. Betty went on to give lectures at schools and local groups about her experience afterwards. So, I mean, Barney wasn't happy about it, and he seemed terrified, and Betty was like, oh, yeah, couple probes, no big deal.
She's a badass.
Since the Hills encounter, one of the things I will say about their hypnosis, there are the full documented hypnosis tapes on YouTube that you can listen to. They're pretty intense. Obviously, we couldn't put them on here for copyright reasons, but we can throw the links in there that you can listen to them. And if you just want to listen to them, it's pretty crazy. And there's a lot of story coverage about these guys. But one of the things specifically that Barney said was, they didn't quite check his eyes and everything, but what they did do was they placed like a circular cup over his genitals, and he feels like they took a sample of semen because, I mean, if you're wanting to know how humans evolve, I mean, that's kind of the start of the process, right?
Alien perverts.
And then he said that they would check his vertebrae on the back and kind of go up his spine to check. So it's just like they said, they're trying to figure out what makes them different from the aliens on the spacecraft. And so I would highly encourage you to listen to the tapes. They're pretty interesting.
I didn't know that was a thing. I'm going to check them out.
Since the Hills encounter, thousands of reports came in, but differed from Betty and Barney's experience in that many who believed they were abducted didn't recall the process or anything particular, just a strong sense that it had happened. A psychologist by the name of Susan Clancy wrote a book in 2005 titled Abducted: How People Come to Believe They Were Kidnapped by Aliens. One man by the name of Tom tells a story about how he found bruises on his back after a shower, and when showing his mother, all she had to say was, well, maybe aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? While there are many, many reasons as to how this could have happened, including the job he worked at, which was construction, this idea of being kidnapped by aliens just felt so right to him, so he believed it.
Yeah, he's full of shit.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe it was a sleep paralysis thing and he landed on his bed super hard.
Nah, cash grab.
Susan goes on to say that this next quote in her book on the idea of aliens and abduction. She quotes, "We don't want to be alone. We feel helpless and vulnerable much of the time. We want to believe there's something bigger and better than us out there. And we want to believe that whatever it is cares about us, or at least is paying attention to us, that wants us, sexually or otherwise, that we're special."
What?
I mean, do you think aliens are out there for sexual gratification from us humans?
No, dude.
I don't know, man. There might be some species
Bunch
out
of
there.
creeps.
So now that we've really heard the story of the hills, I want to talk about some of the key details and facts that might create theories as to what may have actually happened on that September night in 1961. But Cleet, you said earlier, you kind of think this is... Do you think they were abducted?
I think it's the most compelling case.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the things that may have happened. The first fact is that both Betty and Barney were both extremely exhausted individuals due to their work life. Barney had to take a daily trip of 120 miles to Boston for his job as a postal worker, which wreaked havoc on his ulcer. Betty worked for the state of New Hampshire as a children's welfare worker and would juggle up to 120 separate cases at any given time. A few days before the reported sighting, the couple left their home at 4 a.m. to spend a week-long vacation in Montreal. Now, because this was the time before famous ATMs, they ran out of cash early and needed to head home, which is why they were driving through the night to make the most of their time. Because the first question that occurred to me is, why the hell are they hitting a diner for coffee at 10 p.m.? It is said that they were so disturbed about not being able to remember that 2-hour time frame that after seeing the mysterious lights, when a person is too tired to drive and are sleep deprived, they become susceptible to what is known as false memory formation, which can attribute to the story that they told. When it comes to the lights that they saw, they were in fact there, but they weren't UFOs. Rather, they were Jupiter and Saturn, which both burned especially bright that night and were in the exact same location they described seeing the spacecraft.
I don't buy that.
No?
No, that's full of shit.
It just can be that night, man, when they found aliens. It's like they're shining super bright.
It's the first case, like, and it's so specific. Like, I just don't buy it.
Well, there's more. This next fact plays a pretty big part in the alien story itself, because Betty herself was a huge fan of science fiction and a total believer in UFOs. When they finally arrived home, the very first thing that she did was call her sister saying that she had found a flying saucer, which reports say that earlier, about a couple weeks before their trip, her sister called her saying that she found a flying saucer.
Yeah,
Convenient.
that makes the case a little less good.
A little less good, words of Cleet.
Wisdom, really.
When they went to their psychiatrist, the method again that he used was hypnosis, which doesn't actually extract the truth from people or create false memories. What it does is creates a relaxed state where the individual becomes responsive and susceptible to suggestions. It is said that Barney was extremely reluctant at first to believe the abduction idea, but for the 2 years before they went to see the psychiatrist, Betty had talked non-stop about the stories of the aliens and needles, which made it fresh in his mind, therefore could have influenced his mind under the hypnosis. Their description of the aliens being gray and bug-eyed is now the cultural standard for what an alien might look like.
We were sold a lie, people.
Or were we? Another source of stress in the lives of the Hills came from the fact that Betty was white and Barney was black. During this time frame, it was very dangerous to be an interracial couple, and in the book they described the waitress at the diner where they stopped had a quote-unquote reaction to the side of the couple, but didn't explain more of what that reaction might have been. Barney at the time was seeing a doctor who told him to seek out the help of a psychiatrist given his ulcer and high blood pressure issues along with stress. His psychiatrist told him that stress can also cause the false memory creation. The first psychiatrist he saw before the one who put him under hypnosis concluded that aliens may have been an easier concept to deal with than the racism of 1960s America. Barney died shortly after in 1969 due to a cerebral hemorrhage, while Betty died in 2004 at the age of 85. According to the family, she died of lung cancer in her home. Betty went on to believe in UFOs and aliens her entire life up to her death. One of the most famous pictures of Betty is her speaking at a symposium wearing a t-shirt saying, "I was abducted by aliens and all I got was this lousy t-shirt."
That's pretty funny. I like that.
So that, guys, is the story of Betty and Barney Hill. Again, it's kind of a shorter version. There's a lot more to it. Well, not really a lot more to it. Some of the details are a lot shortened in this version, but there are a lot of interview tapes you can look up online. I highly recommend it to hear it from themselves, the words coming out of Betty and Barney Hill. But on that topic, although this is the first documented abduction by aliens, it's by no means the first documented sighting of a UFO. Do you know when the first UFO sighting was, Cleet?
I mean, I think it depends on how you define documentation. I mean, if you're talking about personal testimony or possible historical records, such as like Sumerian,
the first,
I want to say artwork, maybe?
Yeah. So the first documented written evidence or suggestions that a UFO was seen.
I remember hearing a story about a really old culture. I'd have to research it, about a UFO battle happening in the sky. Is that where you're going?
It's on here. It's not the first documented, but it's there. Yeah, it's good. So the very first documented was back in 1440 BC in Egypt. There's a heavily disputed papyrus called the Thule Papyrus, which reports fiery discs were seen floating all over the sky. So 1440 BC is a papyrus that, again, it's heavily disputed. A lot of people don't think it's real, but because it's so old, they can't really verify it.
Yeah, there's weird things in Egypt, dude. We could go down that rabbit hole. They got like fucking little trinkets that look like jets that are perfectly aerodynamic that matches technology that we have today. It's weird, man.
I mean, you might think that the pyramids were built one stone at a time. No, as the UFOs, they did it all at once.
No, I mean, if you look at the water erosion on the Sphinx, it suggests that it's 12,000 years old. Check it out.
All right, sounds good. There are also several reported sightings all throughout 218 BC through 196 AD that talk about phantom ships, sparks that fall from stars and then rise back up to space, and even a fine rain made of silver. In 74 BC in the Roman Republic, it is said that right before a battle was about to break, the sky burst asunder and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. In shape, it was most like a wine jar, and in color, like molten silver. It was reported by both sides of the army, making it extremely credible. During the 16th and 17th centuries, there was a report from the Holy Roman Empire about what was described as an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object and a large crash outside the city. There were hundreds of sphere-like objects that moved erratically overhead. During the 20th century, between 1901 and 1949, the number of sightings increases heavily, mostly occurring in the United States, and usually recounting sightings of UFOs in the sky. From 1950 to 1974, the incidents more than double, and yet again occur mostly in the United States.
America.
The most recent UFO sighting that I could find, you guessed it, occurred in the United States on the East Coast. This took place in 2014 to 2015, where multiple UFO radar visual encounters were made by the United States Navy over a period of 9 months. Videos of 2 of these encounters were released, yet the Navy stated that they have not yet identified the objects.
That's crazy, man.
So that is just a little bit of history on the first alien abduction and some UFO crazy talk afterwards. But guys, I've been excited to talk about aliens, but I'm really excited to hear what you have to talk about, Cleet.
All right, so let's talk about Bob Lazar, the man who allegedly blew the lid off the government having a ton of UFO spacecrafts. This story starts with Bob Lazar, a young physicist in his late 20s working at Los Alamos. In his spare time, he put a jet engine in his Honda, and this gained him notoriety in the local newspaper.
No shit, dude. I want a jet engine in my car.
Could you imagine that? So it got him a story in the front page of the newspaper saying, a physicist at Los Alamos makes a jet engine car. This is important later, but Bob would say that this jet engine was extremely loud, obviously because it's a jet engine, and capable of going over 200 miles per hour.
Just cruising down the freeway at a cool 200.
Could you imagine that?
I mean, cops can't catch you. You're free. Turn that sucker on, you're gone.
So Bob, being really interested in science, decides to join or attend a conference held by Ed Teller, who is the father of the hydrogen bomb. He hops into his jet car, from the Jetsons, and starts driving down to this conference. He arrives fairly early, and Ed Teller is sitting outside the conference area, just reading a newspaper. Being impressed by his fucking jet engine car, they spark a conversation and kind of get to know each other, being men of science.
Just shooting the breeze. Hey, did you see my jet engine? Let me pop the hood for you, buddy.
Dude, if someone drove up in a jet engine car, I would want to know a little bit about him,
I would put a jet engine in my car and then a train horn. Just to have that combination.
You scare the bejesus out of people. You turn off your headlights, pull up to somebody in the night.
I wish they weren't illegal.
Oh, yeah. That's got to be illegal on a lot of levels.
It's very illegal.
Soon Bob leaves Los Alamos and works on some entrepreneurial projects. He soon moves to Las Vegas and starts sorting out his resumes to find a job that tailors his degree in physics. He ends up sending a resume to Ed Teller, who remembers their prior interaction and forwards this resume to EG&G Special Projects.
It's all about who you know, man.
It really is. He put in his own reference saying, this Bob Lazar guy's a good guy. He's a good dude.
And he will always get to work early.
Soon afterwards, he gets called into McCarran Airport, where he goes through a series of interviews. They decide to hire him and tell him that he's going to be working on a classified project concerning advanced propulsions in a remote location. He will be on standby.
Are you Australian?
That got weird. He'll be on standby, and they'll call him as needed to go to McCarran Air Force Base. He'll be on standby.
Fuck!
Dude, it's weird.
He'll be on standby.
It's a previous life. He will be on standby, and as needed, he'll be flown out to the base from this airport hub. When he's called in, he was told he'd be flown out to Area 51. And the airliner would be called Janet. Have you ever heard of that? The Janet airline? It's pretty famous. People speculate that this is an acronym for just another non-existent terminal. Pretty cool. I like that one.
Just another non-existent terminal.
He doesn't set up shop at the main base of Area 51, but about 15 miles away in a place called S4. His first day is pretty boring, and it's full of a ton of paperwork, signing his life away, signing a bunch of NDAs. However, the job turns interesting when they take him to a hangar that has a craft that looks like a flying saucer.
Oh man, what am I going to be doing here?
Well, it's funny you say that because Bob thinks it's hilarious. He's going, well, yeah, people keep seeing these flying saucers in the air. Dumbasses. Like, the military built this. This is just a military aircraft.
Snaps a picture. He's like, guys, look, it's right here.
Full of curiosity, he goes up and places his hand on the craft, but immediately gets reprimanded by an armed guard telling him he's not to touch the craft as of now. He starts to get more information, debriefings, about this craft and how it's of an alien origin, and it's from the Zeta Reticuli star system, specifically the third planet from the sun.
That sounds familiar.
Bob, being a man of science, is highly skeptical about this information, as how would they know that? And could this just be a ploy in case if he goes and tells people, they can recognize the leak when it goes to the public?
Yes.
So to kind of put that in better terms, let's say that they have a bunch of people coming here to study this craft, right? And they give them all these different bullshit stories. So when they go to tell the media that, they're like, oh, we told this fucker that this craft came from fucking Uranus. And we know he fucking leaked it.
Because then all of a sudden it's Uranus all over the papers.
Exactly. Uranus all over the pictures.
You can only hope, Cleet.
His position about the craft changes, however, after meeting his new lab partner named Barry. They work together and are given subcomponents of the craft, specifically with a propulsion system. What was given to them was a reactor, the size and shape of a basketball on a metal plate. Barry starts up the reactor by shooting it with electricity, and it would initiate a gravitational wave field. After starting up the first time, Barry dares Bob Lazar to touch it.
I dare you to touch it.
Try as he might, the closer his hand gets to the sphere, a strong repulsion force pushes it back. He can't touch it. He describes it as trying to push two magnets together of the same charge.
I was going to say, as a kid, that used to piss me off that I couldn't put the magnet pieces
Did you ever
together.
have magnets as a kid, like toys?
Yeah, because I did a science fair project on the magnetic force of magnets, and it literally pissed me off because my grandpa, he works building rockets, and he had these really big magnets, and literally, so as a little kid, there's big circles, and I couldn't put them together, and it legit pissed me off.
That's hilarious.
I did take second in the science fair, though, so that was really cool.
Their job was to try to understand how it worked and to try to back engineer the system. They found out that this could generate gravity and anti-gravity around the craft. So in theory, it could go as fast as it wanted, zigzag, without the effects of inertia or friction. Bob was given a brief overview of other projects going on that were being back engineered, like weapon systems, people learning how to fly it, and metallurgy. It was very compartmentalized, and no one working on the project knew what the others were doing specifically. Bob was made aware that Barry's last partner had died while running tests on the sphere.
Dude, you need a new partner.
He was told that the previous partner was cutting open one of these reactors with a plasma cutter, and it caused something like a nuclear explosion.
Jesus.
Bob does point out that there was a unscheduled nuclear detonation at the Area 51 area. Interesting. While Bob was there, they made very little progress. Bob makes a really good analogy that I really enjoyed listening to. He says if you were to drop a nuclear reactor back in the Victorian age, they would be able to deduce that it was generating power, and they would try to figure out how it worked by dismantling it. They would just start to pick it apart. But once the nuclear shielding was gone, they would die from the radioactivity. It would be so far away from their technology and understanding of nuclear physics, it would seem like magic.
Can you imagine being in that time and all of a sudden, and you're like, what's this thing? And you'd start to pull it apart and
then you die. They'd probably be like, it's the devil. The devil made this.
What kind of witchcraft?
He talks about walking out one day when all of these hangars are open, because there's 9 of them, and they're all parallel. So all of them are open at once, and he sees 9 crafts that are completely different in shape and size. Bob, however, only ever works on this disc-shaped craft. He was allowed to go inside a few times and described there were 3 chairs in the craft that were facing the center where the propulsion system would be placed. He met other people that were studying the actual metallurgy of the craft, and they were able to activate a screen that could make the exterior walls invisible so you could look out of it, almost like a TV screen.
But you probably couldn't see it. So this begs that question earlier where, how do we know that these things aren't around all the time if they can cloak themselves? What if they're constantly studying us?
Well, think about it like this. So it's gravitational fields, right? So it's bending all...
bending the matter and the light, right?
Yeah, it bends the light completely. Bob actually said that if you were to stand under this craft while it was up in the air and it was running, that because the light would be completely bent around it, you wouldn't even see it. Pretty crazy.
So, I mean, yeah, but it's just like you asked, like, are there aliens? Are they here? I don't know, but I mean, if they have all this technology, especially if they're far more advanced than we are, they could be everywhere.
Yeah, and science way ahead of us could look like magic.
We just wouldn't know how to comprehend it.
It's true. So the craft was approximately 52 feet in circumference and had 3 floors. One thing Bob found interesting is there was no electrical components that connected anything. There were no bathrooms or decorations on the walls.
They're very simple.
Yeah. Here's what I thought when I read this, right? Because at first I was like, yeah, they're simple. And then I'm like, wait, what if they're only in this craft for like 20 minutes?
Right.
Like if you could go as quickly as you wanted, like way past the speed of light, you go to another like star system in a couple minutes, you observe it, you go back.
It's like our trip to Walmart. It's like, I'm going to go pick up some groceries. They're like, I'm going to go study these humans.
That's what I thought. Bob never reported any of this, but that's where that's where my mind drifted to. He talks about the actual skeletal frame of the craft to be metal or ceramic. It was cold to the touch. Didn't know, he's not a metallurgist, but people were studying that, but that's what he deduced. One day, while running tests, his supervisor comes in and tells Barry that Bob is ready to see them fly the craft. It was Wednesday night, and they always flew crafts during this day because it was the slowest time when people were driving down the public highway where they could get a vantage point. The craft made a sizzling sound when it started up, and it started something that looked like St. Elmo's fire, this blue electricity coming off the bottom of it while it was rising above the ground. However, when it got to 5 feet, it stopped and became silent. The way the craft moved is it's like I'm trying to explain this in a way that makes sense because it was very complicated. But imagine you have a car, okay? Britton, follow me? Yep. You have a car that's hovering, okay?
A hover
so
car.
The way that it travels is it travels where the wheels are pointing. So the car would go all the way up.
So it's like vertical.
So it's vertical. And wherever the tires are pointing, all 4 of them, that's where it would travel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's vertical. Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's hard to describe. I don't know how to write
hear,
it.
Yeah.
If
and
the
you
tires
would see the bottom of the car.
If the tires are pointing north, it'll go north.
Yes.
There we go.
That's
good.
There you go.
Being a physicist, one thing that Bob found strange is he didn't know who was in the craft flying it, but his supervisor had a radio, and he was communicating to the pilot via the radio. That doesn't make any sense because radio waves are just like light waves, right? They're just a little bit longer. But if this craft was bending light, it should bend radio waves and it should be able to communicate. Yet it did. And he doesn't have an explanation for that. It just worked. He said it shouldn't, but it does.
It would be so frustrating to be so knowledgeable in this field and then just say it just works, but not know how.
Yeah, so there was a government paper rolling around that what they're doing right now is every 8 to 10 years, they bring in physicists to try to understand this. And if they can't figure it out or they get in a roadblock, they shelve it.
Really?
Get back to another 8 to 10 years to see if everything's caught up so they can understand it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. So another thing that I think would be frustrating is, he's new to physics. He's in his 20s, he's probably, I think it would be a dream to see this stuff,
Oh, yeah.
I think the two biggest questions in life, really, when it comes down to it, the two big questions that'll never be answered is, are we alone and what happens when we die? Right?
Oh, God, yeah.
If he's already presented with an answer with this, that's crazy.
But I was telling you, I've spent probably more hours than I should have on both of those questions. Those are literally the two biggest questions I would love to know, but at the same time, I don't know, it'd be kind of scary to know.
It's true.
Because, especially, let's take the dying thing. What happens after you die? What happens if you get the answer you don't want? That just makes death even scarier than it already is, in my opinion.
So imagine that. You are not just on the cutting edge of technology, but you're way far ahead of it. But something terrible happens. They don't let Bob return to the base. He doesn't know why.
Yeah, and he signed all these NDAs, so, he can't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
But somehow we knew.
So the government has been tapping Bob's phones with his permission, but what they find is his wife is cheating on him with a flight instructor. Right? So you have somebody with extremely highly classified materials, but his home life is about to be wrecked. Kind of makes sense that you would be like, hey, sorry, buddy, you can't come down here and keep learning all these secrets until you fix your shit.
His wife's like, he flies much better.
So they don't tell Bob this. They just block him, right? Just a big old pilot block.
Cock block of the pilots.
So he doesn't know what's going on, but he becomes very paranoid. He knows he's seen some crazy shit, right? And he knows he just can't, go anywhere and just work somewhere else.
Yeah. So, one hand, you've seen, 5, 6 spacecrafts? The other hand, your wife's fiddling with someone else. What the hell's going on?
Someone's playing her flute.
Someone's flying her spacecraft.
So, in his fits of paranoia, he believes or is being tailed by government agents while he's going out. And he's afraid he's going to get whacked, all right? They're just going to kill him. So he decides that there's going to be security in showing his friends about what's going on, okay? So I don't know if you know this, Britton. I do because I'm a fucking nerd. But at one point in time, Area 51 expanded its territory, so it wouldn't be really possible to view what they're doing, okay?
Yeah, I knew that.
Hasn't happened yet. So Bob's like, bros, they fly these fucking crazy crafts every Wednesday night. Let's go fucking film that shit.
Let's get a 6-pack of beer. We're going to go here where they fly it, and we're going to record this shit.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they go one night, they film it. They're like, holy shit, this is what you've been doing? Because they go up this mountainside. I can't remember what it's called. And they just
obviously have to be hidden, right?
Well, you got to get a high. So you climb up or you hike up a mountain so you have a vantage point.
Right.
And then you can see everything that's going on in the sky. And they see these lights making these crazy movements, zigzagging through the sky, that if it was a regular plane, if there was a pilot, they'd die from the G-force, right? Anyways, they do that one week, nothing happens. And they're just like, let's just keep riding this party train. Let's just keep filming this.
It's next Wednesday, boys.
It's funny because Bob's he's still 28, right? He's not. He's still a youth that's
he's
a little
in his
bit,
prime.
He takes risks. So he talks about how they brought up a motorhome up there the third time, drinking beers. They got their fucking cameras out. They're having a good time in the middle of the night.
I don't want to sound like that guy, but what has he got to lose at this point? He got shit canned from his job seeing spacecraft. He knows what they're doing. His wife is banging some other pilot.
Some douche in an airplane.
So he's like, what else do I got to lose? Guys, check this shit out. Every Wednesday, we're doing this, and we're going to bring the RV, might cook some meth, and we're going to watch some spacecrafts do their shit.
Instead of Breaking Bad, it's breaking Area 51. Anyways, on the third week, they're out there in the middle of the night. It's so dark they can't see their hands, right? All of a sudden, it's hard to describe what he was talking about, but him and his friend were talking about how they're just talking shit. They're like, yeah, we're gonna
As
go down.
guys do.
We're gonna go down that fucking base and we're gonna steal those crafts. They want to know what's gonna happen. And while they're saying that, how he describes it is all of a sudden he sees this night vision, like scope or goggle fall, and he can see green.
They've been found.
And he's like, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, the lights come on, and he's surrounded by a bunch of military people, and they literally apprehend him.
Oh, God.
This is where it kind of gets strange, I guess. But, you think they just fucking whack the guy, but he doesn't. So they take him to Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is basically a defunct air base. They're not really using it much. They basically tell him why he can't go back to the base. They're like, hey, dude, your wife's cheating on you. Sorry, bro. And they give him the audio tapes of what she's been saying on the cell phones.
To insult to injury. Like, hey, we caught them in the act.
No, it's basically like, hey, dude, your wife's cheating on you. And they're like, that's why we won't let you here. You're never going to come back here. Bye. They let him go. God. Which, again, I'm surprised they didn't kill him.
Poor guy.
So Bob here, still extremely paranoid. I would be too. I would think that, that you're going to have 2 shots to the back of the head and and police will rule it a suicide.
Yeah, you can cover this shit up.
So he reaches out to someone who I would call a role model. I really like this gentleman, and he's a big player in Skinwalker Ranch, George Knapp.
Oh!
An investigative journalist. After doing several interviews and verifying his credentials, he convinces Bob to let him release his story on the 5 o'clock news. George tells Bob that he will become untouchable after this, as if the government kills him, it would only confirm his story.
Yep.
Right after this airs, Bob gets a call from his old superior from the base, S4. All he hears him say is, do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now? And then hangs up the phone.
Oh, God.
Dude, you dropped a bomb.
I'd be terrified.
I would be too. So after this, a lot of Bob's friends that work within the military on secret programs immediately get their clearances revoked. They get fired. They're gone.
Oh, so he tells the story and they just let all of his friends go.
Yep. Anyone that he knows, anyone in his close circle working with the government just gets screwed.
I mean, they could have killed him.
Yeah, I mean, they could. But again, that would kind of give credence to his story.
Absolutely.
Wyatt just hurt him. Hurt him as much as he can so he quits talking, There's a strong effort to discredit him by erasing his past. Like, it gets weird, dude. Like, his school credentials dis-a-fucking-peer. Like, they're gone. He's saying he's got a master's degree in physics. You can't find that even to this day. The school that he says he went to says he never went there.
Damn. I like that word, though. Dis-a-fucking-peered. I like it.
I made it up in the moment.
It makes a whole lot of... it just has more oomph to it. I like it.
That's true. His work history, gone. Los Alamos says he never worked there.
They just wiped his entire life out.
Yeah. George Knapp, being the investigative journalist that he is, fucking badass, finds an old employee directory saying otherwise. Has his name in there saying that he was employed in the 80s. He also finds that newspaper article about him putting a fucking jet engine in his car. That newspaper says he was a physicist at Los Alamos. Smoking gun. Other things that disappear. His birth certificate. His mother's freaking out. She thinks he's going to get whacked. But, Bob just keeps bringing in the proof. What I thought was funny is he's like, George, dude, let's just go down to Los Alamos. I'll have you talk to my old coworkers. They go in there. He shows them where he worked. He greets his old friends. He reminisces. I mean, he worked there. Like, that is like, if anything about the story, that guy worked there.
Yeah.
There was a cover up, but he did work there.
He's not just rolling over on this one. He's like, no, this is what happened.
So some other things that I didn't exactly cover in this story because it's huge is there's a lot of other credible things that come with this story. So, for example, when he's talking about that sphere, in the metal plate is what he calls the fuel source. And it's something called element 115. So it depends on how nerdy you guys are, but I mean, Britton, you know the periodic table, right?
Yep.
Like you have element 1, which is hydrogen, then you have helium, something, carbon, iron. But as you go up, the more atoms are in the particles, right? So in one of his stories, he's talking about something called element 115, which is not in the periodic table at the time. It's it's something that just doesn't exist, right? It's an element, but no one's ever seen it in science.
It's a mystery.
So element 115 was recreated in 2004 in a particle accelerator.
No shit.
Yeah. So the thing is, it's not a stable element as of right now, but it has potential to be so. It can be formed.
You're going places, 115.
Not only that, Bob talks gravity like it's a wave, not a particle. So at the time in popular physics, theories postulated that gravity was made of particles called gravitons. But I don't know if you know this, it was in 2015 it was proven that gravity is made out of waves. What happens is they made this giant detector in the US, okay? I mean, this thing spanned hundreds of miles, and what happened is two pulsars coalesced into one giant mass, and it just increased so much that it caused gravitational waves, and it was detected through these machines, and it proved that gravity is a wave. It's interesting shit. God,
Man, I just
love
feel
it.
like we're getting all these science experiments from Cleve.
I'm a nerd. I'm sorry.
You don't have to apologize for being a nerd.
So-
Nerd's cool.
You know, that's where we're going to end it for now. But I do find Bob Lazar as a very compelling story. And again, so I think both of our stories are very compelling. My favorite thing is I was watching a video of Bob Lazar, and he was like, ever since I came out with the UFOs and everything like that, people always come to my house. They're trying to talk to me. I have people trying to camp out on my front lawn. He's like, leave me alone.
Just fuck off.
That's the most credible thing you could possibly say.
Just leave me alone. So you said for now. Is this something you're going to be continuing then? Because I feel like there's more to this.
I think there's a little bit more to the story, and we can keep talking about it. It's just interesting about how much these things are interconnected. Because we started the story with the same star system, claiming that that's where other beings came from and traveled here. That was pretty crazy.
Well, and maybe that's something that we can talk about going forward. Is maybe we do some research on that star system and figure it out. But I think this one, realistically, our podcast name is Enter the Abyss. The Abyss is what generalized as like the unknown, this
vast
void,
nothingness,
right?
Like space.
And we talk about a lot of shit, and honestly, aliens has been something that I've joked about almost, I think every episode almost, that I think that even from the Pied Piper that aliens took all those children. But aliens has been such a fascinating topic. Whether or not you believe, whether or not you think of these UFOs, we want to hear about them, guys. We want to include you as much as possible in the show. So if you have ideas, opinions, and suggestions on this, let us know. Again, we're excited to hit 10 episodes. It seems pretty minuscule, but we're in the double digits. I hope we get the triple digits at some point. But please let us know, and we really hope you've been enjoying the show. We really enjoy doing it every single week. And I know that we are in extremely trying times right now, but our plan is to continue this week after week after week. And sincerely thank you to all of our listeners, especially those who have been with us since the beginning in every episode. You guys you're absolutely amazing. Thank you.
And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next week.